This is the new Zhiyun Weebill 3, and they've completely redesigned this gimbal with a new style and new features that I think is going to be super useful for creators. So in this video, we're going to talk about this gimbal, but I'm also going to show you how I use this gimbal to craft a story. All right, so let's get into it. I want to say a special thanks to Zhiyun for sponsoring this video. And what we're going to do is talk about everything that's different about this versus the other Weebill gimbals. And also I want to show you how I use this in a real world setting. So make sure you stick around to the second half of this video because you could really see how this gimbal performs and how I was able to use it when I was out on an adventure. So the first thing that you're going to notice is they've completely redesigned the look of the Weebill. So there's no back handle anymore. This is more of the lollipop style gimbal where your hand holds on the bottom, gimbal sits up on top, and there is no other attachment, at least in this configuration. So on the bottom of this gimbal, you actually have two mounting points. One is for a back handle, so you can have that dual hand operation, and the other side is useful for a wrist mount. So when you're using the full setup, it's easier to hold and it's more comfortable. Now, I've been using this gimbal without these attachments. I've been using it just like this. And you'll notice that there is this bigger base on the bottom. And the base is good for just doing quick adjustments to the balance because it's got a nice base to sit on. And it does give you some contact with your hand, which does make it a little bit easier to operate. And this new design makes it so that you can build it out for whatever you're creating. So when I'm out on an adventure, well, this is all I want to take. I don't need a bunch of extras, but if I was going to operate for longer periods of time, then I would use the wrist strap and the back handle, and it'd make it a lot easier to operate for these extended times. Now with this gimbal, they've introduced two new features. One is the light right on the front, so you can add a fill light, and the other is a microphone. You have both a light and a microphone on the gimbal itself. All right, now I'm sitting in my office. I'm using the microphone that's just built into the gimbal handle, and you can tell this is a poor lighting situation. You got super strong backlight, not a lot of fill on your face. So I'm gonna press and hold the light button, let that click on, and you can see how powerful this light is. Now my face is illuminated, and in this setting, I'm getting a good exposure to be able to see my face. So when you're filming yourself or maybe someone on the other side of the camera, you don't have to add an additional light on the camera. You can just use the one that's built into the handle, and you have a lot of good fill light to use. And on this light, you can adjust both the color temperature and the intensity. So if you're in a room with more warm lighting, more tungsten lights, well, you could change your Kelvin to be able to match that. Whereas if you're in a situation with fluorescent bulbs or you have daylight spilling into the place you're filming, well, you can use this light in all of these settings and make sure that your face is the proper color temperature to the ambient lighting that you have in the space. Now looking at the gimbal itself, you have three powerful motors that's going to allow you to put on bigger cameras. Right now I have the A7S Mark III, and I've been using this with all of my 1.8mm lenses. So the one that I've been working with the most is my 20mm 1.8, and I've been adding that on with an ND filter, and I've had no issues whatsoever. And even if you had a bigger camera, this gimbal is still going to be able to hold it. So one of the other gimbals I've been working with from Zhiyun is the M3, which is smaller and even more lightweight. However, it is a little bit tougher to use with a bigger camera setup. You can barely get this camera on with the 20mm. So this gimbal sits in a good place where you can put on a nice sized full frame mirrorless camera and a bigger lens, and you'll still be able to get smooth footage. But along with that, it's also super lightweight. I mean, I've been sitting here shooting this video, just holding this up next to me, and my arm's not getting tired. It's not that heavy. Now mounting the camera to the gimbal, it uses a dual quick plate release system where it has your standard Manfrotto mount, but then on top of that, you have a smaller quick release so that you can always have this bottom plate set to where you need, and then you don't have to rebalance when you put on the camera. Now personally, I use an Arca Swiss system. I like to put that on all the cameras that I use, whether it's on my tripod, my gimbal, or any other device. And with this gimbal, you don't have to use the quick release that Zhiyun provides. I just screwed on an Arca Swiss quick release, and you could use the gimbal the same way. So the way they've built this system makes it super easy to mount any camera and any system onto the gimbal. All right, so let's go over the design of this gimbal. Right here on the front, you have a trigger, and you could set that to any of the follow modes that you want. And you also have options for double click and triple click. Now, right below that, you have a jog wheel, which is fully customizable. So you can have it control a follow focus, which is an addition that you can add on the front of your lens. But if you're not using it, which I typically don't use a follow focus with this size gimbal, you can actually change this to adjust any of the motors. So right now I have it controlling my tilt. So I could roll to my right, brings the camera up, or I could roll down to the left and it brings the camera down. And you could change how fast this moves the motor to fit the way that you like shooting. Now for the operation of the joystick, it's actually positioned off to the left side of this gimbal. So when the gimbal's facing you, you actually have it in a comfortable place where your thumb will rest nicely on the joystick, and underneath that you have two buttons, one for recording and then one for your mode switch. So you could switch your follow mode based on the trigger, or you could cycle through all of them on the mode switch here. And for right-handed operation, this makes it super easy so that you can pull your thumb off of the gimbal and you're not going to be losing any grip on the gimbal itself. With other gimbals I've worked with in the past, the joystick's usually dead center in the back, and you actually have to like twist your hand in a weird way to be able to adjust the joystick. They've just slid it off to the side and pushed it a little further back towards the trigger so that you can easily operate it with your thumb. And then on the right side of the gimbal, you have your menu option, which allows you to open up the menu on the screen itself. You could adjust everything about this gimbal right here on the screen so that you don't need to connect a smartphone to be able to change any of these settings. And then you also have your light control. So you have a little jog wheel on the right-hand side, which you press and hold, and it's gonna turn on the light, and then you can adjust your intensity and your color temperature by just moving this jog wheel back and forth. Now, one thing that I've noticed is that Zhiyun has upgraded how all the locks work on this gimbal. So when you're putting it in your backpack or you're trying to balance, the locks just feel a lot more sturdy and they're easy to flip on and flip off. As for runtime, you get 21 hours worth of battery with this gimbal in normal operation. That's a lot of time. That's gonna last the entire day of filming, if not a few days. The way I've been using this gimbal is I use it in between other shots, and I've charged this gimbal once and I've used it for days. And so that battery just makes a huge difference when it comes to actually using it out in the field. Now, there is an integrated battery into the grip, so you never have to take out batteries to charge them. And it just has a USB-C right here on the front. So recently I was working on a video for my second channel, which is this weird history in LA with World War II. And the story has this weird mystery surrounding it. So what I wanted to do is create this eerie feeling when I was making that video. And a gimbal is the perfect way to be able to do this with slow, subtle motion and being able to like move myself through the space because I was exploring an abandoned ranch throughout the entirety of the video. So let's dig into how I filmed this story. And throughout this section, you're gonna see how well this gimbal performs in a real world setting. So for this shot, we're walking up to where the story takes place and everything's graffitied on the way up. So I wanna use my gimbal to show like walking and actually experiencing the graffiti as we walk through it. So I just have a 20mm on, and I'm gonna just walk kind of in a straight line and follow this path to give you that feeling that the gimbal is you as a viewer. Okay, that was a cool shot. What I wanna get is just a little bit more on the graffiti. So I'm gonna do the same thing, walking back up. It's the fun part about making videos, back and forth. But I'm gonna point just down at the ground, just so I have a quick cutaway to show all this graffiti as we walk up. Okay, so there's like this power line up here with a bunch of shoes. Kind of ominous, I don't know. It's kind of a weird look. Just something I want to capture for the story. I might use it, but the way that they're positioned up on the telephone wire, I'm gonna walk forward while I'm gonna be pointing the gimbal up, and I want to rotate around and come back down. So you're seeing both sides of this street and kind of where we're at in this environment, and just trying to come up with something creative so I'm not always doing the same types of shots where it's like pushing forward and walking or just a side shot. And so I'm gonna put it into tilt to lock. I'm gonna use the joystick, do the movement as I walk. Okay, so there's a cool perspective. I'm up on this like mountaintop, and I'm gonna use the gimbal to be kind of like a drone shot, but up high. So for this shot, I have this cool downward perspective because I'm up on this cliff, and I can tilt the camera up to really show this scene. And so instead of like physically moving with the gimbal, I'm just using it as a super steady way to hold the camera and then just doing a nice tilt up. So we got to a cool location with this big water tower, a staircase off in the distance, and just a lot of visual components that I want to use for the video. And so the shot that I'm going to do is a push forward and a tilt up. And this is going to kind of show the space, but from this perspective where you're looking up at how big things are. How I'm going to perform this move is I'm going to be walking forward with the gimbal, but then I'm also going to be tilting up on the gimbal at the same time. And I'm going to try to keep those two movements smooth and in sync so you get this floating feeling as you look up. And so you can see how the trees have grown around where this rusted water tower is. Okay, so for this shot, we got to a location, it's a house over here that's completely dilapidated and fallen apart. But I just want to get a few panning shots of the location because I'm going to use it for the story. And so this is a really simple move, but it works really well, and it's something that when you're out filming, it's great to always get these nice pans. So just starting from one side of the scene and then working my way over. I don't just twist the gimbal, I usually use like a whole body rotation because that helps just smooth out the shot, make it look super fluid and cinematic. One thing when you're working with gimbals is you got to overly be smooth with everything. So it might feel like you're getting a super smooth shot, but when you actually get into the edit and you're doing this, moving around, things are a lot more jerky. And so what I found is that I just have to be overly slow with everything that I do to get that smoothness that I really want. Now a hack to that is put in 120 frames per second, and then you can be a little bit faster and then really smooth it down later. Okay, so let me get one other shot here. These pans are great, but all this barbed wire is something I talk about in this video a lot. And this is a cool spot where I can get really close to this barbed wire and it's all twisted and curled around. So I'm using my 20mm and I'm gonna get right up on this barbed wire, use a close focus, and I just wanna follow it as it goes along the fence. And it could be a cool thing to use in this story. So I'm gonna swap over to manual focus. I wanna bring that focus pretty close. And I'm using super wide lens so you get that distorted perspective. And I'm gonna swap over to 120 frames per second to this. And I'm doing my best just to use the gimbal to follow the barbed wire as I move. And I have it in follow mode, so it's gonna tilt as I tilt. It's gonna pan as I pan. And I'm just gonna work my way around this crazy texture of the trees and the barbed wire and try not to get caught by it while I'm moving past it. So the shot that I want to get now is walking through these trails. There's lots of cool textures and just the trail kind of goes in and out of all these trees. So I want to show that as I'm hiking through. So I'm going to do a point of view perspective. I'm going to put the gimbal in the tilt lock mode, and I'm actually going to hold it kind of like a flashlight. So I'm going to be completely vertical with the gimbal, and that allows me to move when I'm walking up and down and let it not bounce as much. And also I can rotate back and forth. And with this gimbal, the new design with this base, it actually gives you a little bit of wrist support when you do this, so it's useful. And I'm basically going to follow the trail as we move through. And the idea is that I could either play this in real time or I could speed this up and make a hyperlapse out of it, showing me moving quick through this landscape. One of the shots that I always want to get when I'm working with a gimbal is just the push in. And so basically I just set the camera forward. I'm in lock mode or I use tilt lock depending on if I end up turning or not. But majority of the time, lock mode is the way to go. And then just walking without any bobbing with the camera. That's the hardest thing when it comes to working with a gimbal, is getting all of that up and down bobbing motion, because gimbals are smooth, but they're not going to fix that. So you want to sit down low, kind of like a squat position in a way, and then you're going to just move really slowly. And the idea is that you don't want your arm to move up and down. Essentially, your arm is becoming the Z-axis. And it's going to take practice, but that is one of those things that you just learn, and it's going to help smooth out the shot so much. Now I didn't want to do another one of these shots, but I'm going to have the camera pointed up as I go up these staircases. There's 500 stairs to get down to this canyon floor, so I want to show that in a few different ways. So I'm going to use lock mode. I'm going to go up the stairs, I'm going to go down the stairs, just a bunch of different shots of stairs that I could use throughout the video. For this shot, I'm gonna use like a jib-like shot. So I'm gonna start down low and then raise the camera up way up into the sky to kind of give that like floating camera feel. And this is was a farm or something, but it's a cool thing to show like all these ruins over here. And so I'll start down low and then it reveals what's way up above. Let's do this. So that shot looks cool, but I'm also just gonna get a shot from like way up in the sky and like moving around this space, because I don't know what I'll use for the edit and how much time I need, but it might just be cool to see it from a higher perspective than the reveal. Whenever I'm doing these videos, you never know exactly which B-roll makes sense, if it's a scene where you want to reveal something or if it's a scene where you're just cutting fast, so you just need quick shots. So it's good when you have time to just get options and try some different things that could be used in the edit. Okay, for this next shot, I want to create an orbit. This is a move I like to use all the time when I'm flying a drone, but you can do the same type of thing with a gimbal. And the powerhouse is a big part of the story. It's down here. And so I want to create this big kind of arcing, swinging motion where it's in the background and you have some trees foregrounded, and it kind of shows the area and it shows how nature is kind of integrated in with all these ruins. So I'm going to start over here. I'm going to make sure that I'm locked my focus on the powerhouse, because that's what I want to be in focus and I don't want it bouncing. And I'm going to kind of point this way, and then I'm going to swing around, so it's a little bit more of a orbit than having your subject centered. And when I get my subject completely centered, then I'm going to lock onto it. So kind of a cool shot that mixes a reveal with also an orbit action. So when I'm out filming my adventure films, this will definitely be one of the tools I take with me to capture super smooth shots wherever I'm at. If you want to see more information about this gimbal, make sure you check it out down below in the description. But next, make sure you check out this video right here, which dives into how I take a script and turn it into a full adventure video. I'll see you on the next one.